What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nash here, welcome back to the channel, and today I have an updated Egyptian god deck profile for you guys. Now I know what you guys are thinking, why do an update on the deck that really, it does nothing. There's no support. You would think that, except the fact that we did get support, and my camera is a little foggy. Hang on, guys. My camera's foggy. Okay, there we go. Wait. Okay, we're good. Sorry, guys. I had to clean the lens on the camera. Anyway, we actually did get some support from the 2022 10 of Ancient Battles. And ironically enough, only 3 of the 4 are actually pretty good, while the other one is not. And I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean? Well, that one card is Soul Energy Max, and it's kind of weird to say. Actually, you know what? Maybe it is good. Which one's better? Breaking Ruin God or Soul Energy? I think Breaking Ruin God is better. Yeah, definitely the Breaking Ruin God is a lot better. For obvious reasons, but we'll get to that later on. But it does use up. So it does use up the new support that we got in the tins, and excuse me, and I did a little bit of testing with the deck, and it's a lot better than it was before, that's for damn sure. But hopefully you guys are ready for this deck profile. If you guys are, and you guys want to see more deck profiles in the future, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. And as always, make sure you guys follow me on all my social media. Links will be in the description below. And if you guys want to send me any fan mail, the info will be in the description as well. And before we get started, I actually want to let you guys know that I posted how can I put it? I guess you could say sort of like a suggestion post on my community tab. So if you guys have not done so already, check it out. I basically asked you guys what decks you guys want to see me profile. You guys can send me you guys can come up with anything, literally anything, and I'll try and do it. I may have to delete some of the decks that I already have on my list, but but we shall see. But if you guys do have any deck profile ideas, you guys can let me know in the community tab. Let's get straight into it. Obviously, kicking these off, you got the 3 Egyptian gods. You got Obelisk the Tormentor, Slifer the Sky Dragon, and of course the Winged Dragon of Ra. You cannot go wrong with these cards. Like if you don't have any of these 3 cards in your deck, you're not playing an Egyptian god deck. Literally, it's sort of like an anti-meta strategy, but at the same time, it's kind of not. Like if you're looking for an anti-meta strategy, Numeron is probably the best deck to deal. But what's cool about this deck is that your main focus is the token summoning. That's your main goal. Your main focus is the token summoning off of the reactor slimes and the scapegoats. Link them off into the link monsters that you have at your disposal, and just combo up from there. So again, the 3 Egyptian gods are mainly there as like your beaters, to attempt to go for game, basically. Next up, we have a single copy of the Winged Dragon Raw Sphere Mode, and the reason I'm only running one is because of the fact that the fact that you're gonna be doing a lot of drawing, or at least some form of drawing off of the effects of of cards like the True Name, and even also Nightmare Unicorn, co-linked to to the Phoenix and the Cerberus. So it's gonna be interesting to say the very least. But yeah, this is sort of like your lava golem for the whole deck. It lets you tribute 3 monsters off of your opponent's board and then just summon it to their board. Your turn comes, the monster comes to your side. You trigger its effect. You summon Raw, and Raw instantly becomes a 4,000 beater, which you pay 1,000, and you can easily break your opponent's board easily, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have a single copy of Guardian Slime, which basically just helps facilitate into the Egyptian God Slime, which I am only running 2 of in the extra deck, which we'll get to that later on. Next up, we have 3 copies of Ra's Disciple. Probably not the best card to be in this deck, just because of the fact that you have so many other ways to to get out Obelisk and Slifer. So not the best, but what's cool, but they are in here to help, to do indeed help summon Obelisk or Slifer or Ra, especially when you have a card like Soul Crossing in the deck. It's pretty good. It's pretty decent. Next up, we have 2 copies of Millennium Seeker. This is sort of like your battle trick, if you will. So when you take 1,000 damage of in battle or by effect, you can special summon him. You can special summon Seeker from your hand. And what's cool about him is that he has other effects, which reads: you can target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, except a monster with question mark attack. Your opponent can choose 1 monster from their deck, except a monster with question mark attack. If they choose not to, or if the targeted monster has higher attack than the chosen monster, special summon that targeted monster to your field. And if you do, shuffle the chosen monster back into the deck. Otherwise, your opponent adds the chosen monster to the hand. So this basically just helps. This can help facilitate into any of the 2 one of the 2 rank 4s that I have in the extra deck, which are Silent Honor and of course Time Thief Redoer, for obvious reasons. But for the most part, it's not gonna come up. It really isn't. It isn't gonna come up at all. Just because of the fact that your opponent is gonna definitely is definitely gonna have an out to it, if you will, which it is what it is. But honestly, Seeker is pretty cool because if you special summon him and you normal summon one of your holding monsters, which spoilers, you basically get to trigger off their effects and then just overlay them into a Time Thief Redoer or even a Silent Honor Arc, and just go from there, which is pretty cool. And speaking of holding monsters, we have 3 holding legs and 2 holding arms. Holding legs is pretty cool because it's sort of like a much more refined version of Giant Trunade. And what's even more cool about him is that, hang on guys. Sorry guys, I had something caught in my throat. Anyway, Legs has a second effect that reads you can banish this card from your grave, then target a set spell trap your opponent controls. It cannot be activated until the end of the next turn. So what's cool about this is that this can work work in so many It can work with or rather against Eldritch, which is which is a pretty interesting one. Obviously, yes, your opponent will be able to chain cards, but for the most part, it's actually pretty good because once you've triggered off, holding legs effect, you can then overlay legs and seeker into I'll say a time thief redoer, and if your opponent were to activate a card oh, I don't know, like a dark hole or some form of destruction card, you can then chain time thief redoer, trigger its effect, detach the holding legs, and time thief redoer gets banished, which then gives you access to banish the said holding legs, and basically preventing your opponent from activating the back row that you have chosen, which is pretty cool. So it's a nice little, it's a nice, cool little party trick, if you will. And then holding arms is sort of like it's a really bad. It's basically a really bad fiendish chain, if you will, which is kind of okay, but again, for the most part, you're gonna be using both the arms and the legs to exceed someone and to go into your link plays, which is pretty cool. But still, these are really, but other than the fact that they're really bad, in a deck like this, they're really good anti-meta cards because as I said before, holding legs is a giant Trunade and a cold wave, so to speak, for a back row that you choose. And holding arms, again, as I said, is a fiendish chain, which is pretty cool. And then to round out the monsters, we got the 2 reactor slime to help go into the metal reflex slime, which then goes into the Egyptian god slime, and then of course 2 scapegoats to help facilitate the Link Karibo IP Masquerena plays, which is just absolutely nuts. For these spells, we have a nice little fuck ton of spells. Just like we had a nice fuck ton of monsters, we have a fuck ton of spells. So first up, we have 3 copies of the True Name. This card is absolutely nuts. This card, paired off with the 3 copies of Card Advance, which I am running 3 of, is absolutely insane. So Card Advance effect reads: look at up to 5 cards from the top of your deck, place them on top of the deck in any order, and you contribute summon 1 monster in addition to your normal summon or set this turn. So this is basically a nice way to go into Obelisk without even though you had already committed to your normal summon, you can just go ahead and activate Soul Crossing, and boom, Obelisk, Cypher, or Ra comes to the board. Excuse me, which is pretty cool. And then the True Name just basically it basically just works. So Card Advance, obviously you get to know the next 5 your next 5 draws, and then the True Name, you get to call the top card of your deck and draw it. And if it's the declared card, which 9 times out of 10 with Card Advance, it's gonna be that card, then not only can you get to add that card to your hand, but you get to also add Cypher, Obelisk, or Raw to your hand as well. So it's essentially, it's sort of like a pot of greed, if you will, so to speak, which is pretty cool. So there's not much to say about it, except that it's a pretty busted card. But another thing too is that you could special summon one of the Egyptian gods off of the True Name, but the problem is that because it was special summoned, they get sent to the graveyard during the end phase, which is kind of bad. kind of bad, honestly. But next up, we've got the one copy of Rank on Magic Numeron Force. This is basically your Dark Ruler no more. So if Silent Honor is the only monster on board that you have, and your opponent has a fuck ton of cards on board, you can activate Numeron Force, target Silent Honor Arcs, go into Silent Honor Dark, and it basically acts as a Dark Ruler no more for your opponent's whole board. In which case, they can't do nothing with their board. It's essentially the board is essentially broken, and the only thing that they could do is cry like a bitch. That's all they could do for the most part. Now for the one-ofs, we got the one Harpy's Feather Duster with the one Called By, and of course the one Monster Reborn because, well, back row removal is awesome, hand traps are a pain in the ass, and summoning a monster from your opponent's board, from your opponent's graveyard, is pretty OP. Next up, we have 3 copies of Soul Crossing. This is basically the one way that you can summon any of the 3 Egyptian gods without tributing any of your monsters, which is really cool. So the effect reads: during the main phase, immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon one divine monster, one divine beast. When you do, you can tribute a monster or monsters your opponent controls, even though you do not control them. But if you tribute summon this way, apply this effect until the end of the next turn. After this card resolves, you can only activate 1 card or effect per turn, not counting the effects of Divine Beast monsters. You can only activate 1 Soul Crossing per turn. So it is a bit bad, but what's cool about this is that this is basically a much more refined version of Soul Exchange, which is pretty nuts. Pretty nuts to say the very least. And then we got the one-ofs of the brand of the new, quote-unquote, new, the new Egyptian God support. So first up, we have obviously the Thunder Force Attack, the Fist of Fate, the Breaking Ruin God, Ancient Chant, and of course the Revived Sky God. Thunder Force Attack has a very interesting effect where it lets you destroy all the monsters that your opponent has on board, and you basically get to draw cards up to the number of monsters that were destroyed by this effect and sent to your opponent's graveyard. So it's sort of like a much more revitalized version of Card of Sanctity, where if your opponent had 6 cards had 6 monsters on board, guess what? You're gonna be drawing 6 cards, and your opponent and Slifer could have who the fuck knows how much attack, which is pretty nuts. Fist of Fate actually focuses on, I believe, the back row. Yeah, it focuses on destroying the back row, which is pretty cool, and not only that, but it's also a quick play spell imperm, if you will. So it's an imperm Harpy's Feather Duster, which is pretty nice. The Breaking Ruin God. This is one of the new ones that I mentioned. That was from the tin. So the Breaking Ruin God's effect reads: the activation of this card or its effects cannot be negated, nor can its effects be negated. Spell summon 1 Obelisk the Tormentor from your hand or grave, and if you do, it's unaffected by your opponent's card effects this turn. If you tribute 2 or more monsters you control at the same time to activate your card or effect while you control Obelisk, you can banish this card from your grave, banish all monsters in your opponent's grave, and if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each. You're going to use each effect once per turn. So the reason why I chose to run Ruin God instead of Soul Energy Max is because Soul Energy Max effect reads: if you control Obelisk, whose original attribute is Divine, in your monster zone, tribute 2 other face-up monsters, destroy as many monster per control as possible, and if you do, inflict 400 damage to your opponent. During the main battle phase, you can banish the card from your grave, add 1 Obelisk from your deck or grave to your hand. Then, after this effect resolves, you can normal summon Obelisk. So the big difference here is that is that Soul Energy Max, its effects can be negated. Breaking Ruin God's effect cannot. That's why I chose to run Ruin God instead of Soul Energy Max, is because of that. And also you deal an additional 100 points more damage to your opponent as well, which is pretty nice. And then of course we got the one Ancient Chant. I know that some people are probably cringing right now, saying that I should be running two, like at least like 2 or 3. To be fair, I didn't have any room for a second or third, so that's why. But Ancient Chant is really cool because this card acts as, I guess, sort of like a Rhoda for Raw. So if you have both your Sphere Mode and Raw, and the Winged Dragon Raw in your graveyard, you can add one of them to your hand, and then later on banish Ancient Chant from your graveyard, and then chain Soul Crossing. You can actually chain Soul Crossing, and then just go from there, which is pretty nice. And then just go from there, which is pretty. I think that's the correct move. Yeah, I think so. I believe so. I never tested out that theory, but I believe that that's the right chain to go, because you're basically normal summoning, if you will, Raw, in which when you do, Ancient Chance effect triggers and it becomes 4,000 right there, which is pretty. Or actually rather it becomes the same attack as distributed monsters from your opponent's board. So Soul Crossing, again, is sort of like a Monarch Stormforth, if you will, which is pretty cool. And then to round out the monsters, we have 2 copies of Mound of the Bound Creator, and for the traps we have the revived Sky God, which I was going to mention here in a second, or rather a second ago, but must have forgot. But Revived Sky God's effect reads: the activation of this card or its effects cannot be negated, nor can its effects be negated. Supposed to summon 1 Slifer from your graveyard, then each player draws cards until they have 6 in their hand. You can banish the card from your grave, place 1 Monster Reborn from your deck or grave on top of your deck. Then if a Divine Beast is in your grave, draw 1 card. So this is basically basically it's a Card of Sanctity. That's all it is. It's Card of Sanctity, which is just too broken. That's all there is to it. And if you have Monster Reborn in your graveyard, you put it on top of your deck, draw it out, and you basically have yet another monster to go into your link place, which is really nice. And then to round out the main deck, we got the 2 copies of Waken the Dragon, mainly for the fact that I am running Ally of Justice Decisive Armor and number 89 Diablosis the Mind Hacker, which is hilarious. 2 copies of Metal Reflex Sign, again to go into the Egyptian God Slime, which then goes into one of your Egyptian gods. And then 2 copies of Solemn Warning, because obviously you don't want your opponent having monsters on board. Excuse me. Now for the extra deck, as I had just mentioned, I am running 2 copies of Egyptian God Slime. Not much else to say about it. It's a 3,000 beat stick, and it can help go into your Egyptian gods, which is really nice. We got the Ally of Justice Decisive Armor because of the fact that I believe in the current format there's a few light attribute decks out there. I don't remember which ones they are, but Ally of Justice but this card, Decisive Armor, just ensures that you can easily win games just off of Decisive Armor alone, which is really nice. We got the Zeus. Yes, Zeus is in here because of the fact that we've got the Time Thief Redoer, and of course the Silent Honor Dark. Board wipes for days. I know some people might think that Zeus is, we've already reached past its prime, but it's still a pretty nasty card. It's still pretty good, but Zeus is sort of like it's a much more better version of Nibiru, I'll say, which is pretty cool. We got Diablosis the Mind Hacker, which is a really interesting anti-meta card because what's interesting about this is that you can force deck out your opponent, and all they can do is just scoop, plain and simple. And then, of course, as I had mentioned, we got the one Time Thief Redoer, the Silent Honor Arc, and Silent Honor Dark. And then for the links, we've got the one Axico Talker, the Decode Talker, the Nightmare Unicorn, the Phoenix, the Cerberus, the IP Masquerina, and the Link Karibo. So that's pretty much it for the Extra Deck. Not much else to talk about, honestly. It's about the same, but the side deck is interesting. Because the side deck, we've got the 2 Artifact Scythe, which basically is a Buster Lock for your opponent, which is just insane. We got the 2 Ash, the 2 Ogres, the 2 Bells, and then of course we got the True Sun God. This is the 4th and final new card that came out of the tins, and the effect reads: when this card is activated, add one Winged Dragon Raw, or a card that mentions it from your deck to your hand, except this card. Monsters except the Winged Dragon Raw cannot attack the turn they are special summoned. Once per turn during your main phase, you can send this card from your field or one Winged Dragon Raw Immortal Phoenix from your deck to the grave, and send one Winged Dragon Raw from your monster zone to the grave. So it's sort of like a foolish burial. It's sort of like a foolish burial, but to be fair, it's not that good. It's literally it's not that good, honestly. It's okay, if Raw was the main star of the show, but it's not. So I think what I'm gonna do this time, you know what? Fuck this card. What I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna add the Nightmare Griffin. Yeah, I think so. I think I'm gonna add the Nightmare Griffin instead of the True Sun God, and the reason being is because I'm not running Immortal Phoenix in the deck, just because Phoenix is just a really bad card in my opinion. So Nightmare Griffin is now going to be in the side deck, just in case if something like, I'll say, the Ally of Justice Decisive Armor is, doesn't do so well, and the number 89 does work out so well, I can side out. I could then side out the Ally of Justice and one of the Waken the Dragons and replace them with, say, with the Griffin and and whatever other cards that I may have in my side deck, which I will now reveal the rest. Which I am running a 3rd Bound the Bound Creator, a 3rd Metal Reflex Sign, 2 Zing Zang Hu, just in case if the Harpy's Feather doesn't work out. Zing Zang Hu just basically ensures that your opponent's back row does not get triggered. So it's basically holding legs, but in a continuous track form, basically, which is really cool. And then, of course, we got the 2 Solemn Strike to round out the whole deck. So, all in all, that is the deck. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more deck profiles in the future, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and follow me on my social media. Links will be in the description below. Don't forget to check out the community tab. I just posted my very first post. Check it out. And of course, if you guys have any fan mail that you guys want to send me, the info will be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.